What's up, everybody? This is Jose with Oakland Latinos United, aka Oakland Latinos Unidos, live with J, episode number 81. Thank you guys for joining in today. We're gonna have a couple of guests today. Hopefully, definitely gonna have one guest. Another guest might tap in briefly as well. And what are we gonna talk about today? Well, the top subject for today is gonna be one that's I don't know, it might be controversial for some people, but it is what it is. We're going to speak a little bit on it, and we're going to break down some of the history, some of the truth, some of the facts, some of the inconsistencies, and whatnot. And we're going to talk about basically, as you've seen, Afro Mexico or Afro Mexicans, and what is that, and how is that a part of Mexico? How can black people or anything African be part of Mexico when we are only white and indigenous, right? Of course, that's a story that we like to tell, that we are only Spaniard and we are only indigenous. You know, we have a propensity to want to side with the colonizers, unfortunately. And when it comes to other people, it's like, no, we're not that. But that's part of having a colonized mentality. But we're going to talk about a little bit about the African influence and history in Mexico, and how it affected Mexico, and was there ever Africans in Mexico, or slavery in Mexico, or any of that. And we'll get into that. I'm gonna have a guest. He's on. It looks like he's already on, so I'm gonna send him the link for he can jump on with me real quick, because he's I haven't I've studied about this stuff. It's been so long. I'm a little iffy on it. Not iffy, but I'm a little not good at it right now because I haven't caught up. Um, but he might be a little bit more on it. So I sent you the link. Flo, if you see it, jump on from Mexicali, and there's Black Russell now over there. Yeah, the Haitians. But we're going to talk about way before that. And we're going to talk about slavery in Mexico, brought in by the Spaniards, by the colonizers. And yes, there was slavery in Mexico, whether people want to accept it or not. One thing that I have always found interesting is how is it the United States, the Caribbean, most of Central America, whether you want to accept it or not, the whole Caribbean coast of Central America is almost all black. Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Belize, Costa Rica, Panama, you know what I mean? All have black people. Colombia have black people. Venezuela has black people. Peru and Ecuador has black populations. But yet somehow Mexico, by some magical way, does not. And we're gonna break down and dispel the myth. So let's see if Flo, I seen him on here. Flo, I sent you let me send you the link again for you can tap on, because and this isn't a discussion about were the Olmecs black. No, we're not going to talk about pseudosciences. We're going to talk about basically the colonization of Mexico by the Spaniards. But one thing that we can be sure of is, yes, there was African slavery in Mexico, and we'll talk about that. So we're gonna have a guest, Flo, who used to run the Raza Stem podcast. What's your group called now?
It's Flow, man. I still go by Flow. The reason why I changed the name is because I was just doing too many things, and I feel like Rasa Stan was just very limiting. But I still cover Rasa topics, and I'm still in love with history. I mean, history is what I majored in college. I taught it for 10 years, so I'm pretty knowledgeable on the subject.
And as you know, I'm a hood historian, so
I
I know,
know.
like this.
Yep.
I'm a little rusty on the Afro Mexican history because it's been a long time since I read about it, but I have read about it. I'm pretty well versed on it. It's just been so long. It's been like 10 years since I really did anything on it, but I've been wanting to do a live on the subject. But why do you? Oh, I'm sorry. Before we get started, introduce yourself real briefly for those who don't know you.
Yeah. So, like I said, I go by Flow. That's the name of my channel as well. But that's the name that I use for a number of reasons. But I mean, like I said, I cover a number of topics, and one of them is history, and more specifically, our community's history, because I feel like there isn't a lot of people. I know you're one of the first ones on YouTube that came out,
Yeah.
and I met you through my colleague. Brown 96,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
we have conversations left and right about different topics, but this one in particular, when you mentioned it, I figured, oh well, I'll give you some time and I'll give you my 2 cents on the matter, and but yeah, I mean, pretty much a historian.
What part of the world are you from?
I am from Los Angeles.
What I live from SoCal, SoCal, Northern California Connect,
Yes, sir.
the Bay
Yes.
in LA. But so why do you think? Okay, two questions I have for you, and you can answer them at any point. Why do you think the subject of African history of Mexico is so controversial with people? I mean, before I even started this live, I already had the haters hitting me up.
Of course. Of
And
course.
why was the black consciousness, or at least the African consciousness of Mexican history, forgotten about or erased in many ways?
Great questions. I think today in today's society, there is a big push to really, embrace the native root, which I think historically has always been the case since the revolution, but more so today. There's a lot of people out there that we know personally that, identify with solely indigenous. And I think that when you bring in this third element to the history, some folks feel threatened by that. And they think that, well, it's erasing our history. Obviously, you have things like the Olmecs being claimed as African, which is not true. I mean, that's
Yeah,
also been,
that's true.
displayed,
Sometimes,
right?
yeah,
But a lot of people feel threatened by that, and I think that they shouldn't, because it's still part of the identity of Mexico. And obviously, it's not as visible as it is in places like the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico or Colombia or other places where
yeah,
the influence is very evident.
yeah, yeah,
But it's still a big part of Mexico. And matter of fact, the first slaves other than the Caribbean that arrived in the Americas arrived in Mexico through Veracruz, right? Right
yeah,
after the conquest, they arrived, and they were even part of the conquest. I mean, we have Juan Garrido, who was a conquistador, who was black, who participated in the conquest. So the black experience in Mexico, Latin America, Central America is very prevalent. It's just not as visible as you see it in other countries.
and why do you think that is though? What? Because of the story that I've read, at least in my time reading the history of blacks in Mexico, was it the Spaniards had a thing where they wanted everyone to be mixed, and that's
Yes.
where the mestizaje came from.
Mhm.
And from what I remember in college, it was something about like the more mixed you make them, the more white they become.
Yes. Yes. So,
So
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, so is that the reason why, at least in Mexico, the black uh, history, or at least the black influence, kind of disappeared a little bit?
I think that's part of it. Obviously, intermixing, was encouraged. It's ironic because in the United States, I mean, it wasn't. It was the opposite, right? But in the Spanish caste system, the more European you had, the closer you would get to white, as close as you could get to white, right?
Yeah,
But another reason why Mexico is so much different than the other Latin American countries is because Mexico had very strong indigenous populations, very strong epicenters, civilizations that other places didn't have, right? The Caribbean, yes, you had the Tainos, but they didn't have huge cities or huge civilizations. So they were easily displaced, right? They didn't have, they were not as numerous. And in Mexico, you couldn't really, even with the smallpox epidemic, you couldn't displace these people. So
yeah,
the root, as a book I would recommend for anybody who's on this live or listening, it's called Colonial Blackness. It's more specific to Mexico. And it talks about how in the very beginning of the colonial period, about half of the population had some kind of African in them,
yeah,
So and there were more Africans or mulattoes, as they call them, right,
yeah,
than Spanish people during that period because of the importation. I mean, it was right there. It was right next to Veracruz, and but what happened is as more people mixed, right, then the blackness was diluted. Obviously, with indigenous, like I said, once the indigenous population recovered, then that became less and less visible. Of course, you have Veracruz, which is really,
yeah.
and then you have the Costa
Tabasco,
Rica,
Tabasco as
Guerrero,
well.
yes, right. You have other parts of Mexico, even
Guerrero,
yeah, northern Mexico too.
oh yeah, in
Coahuila,
Coahuila.
the Mascogos, right? Those
Yeah,
individuals who escaped the slavery in the United States, right? They were welcomed by Mexico during this time. So a
yes.
lot of those people are descendants of American slaves.
And I've even read, and these are states that never get identified with having blackness in them. I even read that even Michoacan,
Yeah.
uh, Guanajuato,
Yep.
San Luis Potosí, even Chiapas has African influence, and Yucatan and
Absolutely.
Quintana Roo.
Absolutely. Yeah, basically every state. Basically every state, but obviously it's just more visible or more prevalent in those specific states because they were able to keep some of that tradition or blackness, if you want to call it that, right? Because I mean, I'm from Michoacan, my family's from Michoacan, and I do have black ancestry. It's not as visible, obviously, and it's not
Yeah,
as prevalent as you would say someone from Guerrero, right? But through DNA testing, through genealogy, through historical context, I was able to put them all together, and it matched up. And when I went to Mexico about, I want to say 10 years ago, in that specific village where my family is from, they talked about having haciendas and plantations and how there were African slaves. So it all added up, and it was a great time to be discovering this because I was one of those dudes. I was like, yeah, I'm like super native. Look at me, right? Obviously, my phenotype is probably more native than anything else, but there's more than that, right? And I think that goes back to your question about why people don't like this is because most people who are looking for an identity and they find something and then if it gets questioned, they're like, "Who the hell am I? I got to
yeah.
go back to square one." And now it's like, what do I do again, right? So I think accepting that we are who we are, whether it was intentional or not, I mean, it is what it is.
For me, I'm going to tell you how I discovered, and it was purely accidental, how I
Mhm.
discovered that there possibly is an African root in Mexico. When I was a kid, within my own family, and even like friends of the family who were all from the same region where my mom was from, I would notice that they had different features. They
Yeah.
had like wavy hair. They had phenotypes that
Mhm.
resembled more like a mulatto or like
Yep.
like maybe like a Creole person from New Orleans. You know what I mean? And that wouldn't make sense to me. I'd be like, why do they look like that? They're
Yep.
not Puerto Rican. They're not from Central America, but they look kind of black, kind of like they would have
Yep.
some kind of. Even my own, I have an uncle who has a different mom than my mom, same dad but different mom, and even he has like a natural afro. Like his hair is naturally wavy, and he has phenotype is more what you would consider mulatto, and
Yes.
that didn't make sense to me.
Mhm.
And I would be like, but, and then I would ask people, like, ¿por qué se miran así? Why do they look like that? And people would be like, oh, they're just dark. The sunburn.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that was kind of like what was saying. And then I read a book when I was in high school. It was about Mexico, and it talked about African history, and it talked about a guy named Yanga. And I was like, wow, I never heard about
Yep.
this. Like, what is this? And
Yep.
that's right there. I was like, oh, okay, that all makes sense now. Why there's some Mexicans that looked like that. And even in school, I could remember some Mexicans I remember this one Mexican, this one kid. For the longest time, I thought he was a mulatto, bro. I thought he was half Mexican and half black. For the longest time. And
Wow.
one day I asked him, "Hey, bro, what are you? You're half Mexican and black, right?" He's like, "No." I said, "He's like, I'm Mexican." I'm like, "Really?" Oh, we have another guest. She's actually from Veracruz. She's gonna tap in with us.
Nice.
Chewy, there's the link. It says StreamYard. Just tap into it and I'll let you on. But let's let her get on real quick where she could introduce herself before we could talk about Yanga. I want
Nice.
to really talk about that. That's an important thing that I want to talk about for some of these folks could know what it is. But yeah, and I started reading a little bit about it, and I actually went to Veracruz. Never been to Guerrero, but I've been to Veracruz, and I seen obviously in Veracruz everyone's mixed now, but you could definitely see the traces not
Absolutely.
only in the music, in the food, and in the culture of what you call Afro Caribbean. You could definitely see it in the culture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's excellent points. Like I said, and you're very fortunate to be able to find that book at that age. I mean, because this study of blackness in Mexico is pretty recent. I mean, for the longest they weren't even recognized as a population until probably like 10, 15 years ago, where
years
they
ago, yeah,
they
yeah. This
started
is a
to
long time ago,
count them in the
bro.
census, and now I think if I'm correct, it's about like 2 or 3% of the population in Mexico, which is still pretty low. I mean,
Yeah,
considering that obviously more countries have higher populations, but just the fact that people are identifying with the term is very powerful. And there's a lot of people who experience discrimination to this day, right? When they go to
yeah,
certain places like Mexico, especially Mexico City. Mexico City is one of the most racist cities in all of Mexico, not just to blacks, but I mean to even native peoples, which is kind of
yeah,
ironic. It's the epicenter of the Aztecs and the Mexica, right?
So we have a
But
guest coming in.
all right, sure,
Uh,
man.
Let her introduce herself real quick. Thank you for joining us. Introduce yourself real quick.
Can you hear me and see me? I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, for
Hmm.
sure.
Oh, here I am. Okay. My name is actually Maria, and I am from Veracruz, from Alvarado, Veracruz.
So eres
So,
jarocha.
Jarocha.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
And do you self-identify as Afro Mexican or you're just Mexican?
I've always just said Mexican, and then if people ask a little further, I do say Jarocha, but at least people over here, they wouldn't know what that is.
Hmm.
So I usually just go with Mexican just to keep it simple.
I feel you. And you're familiar with the story of Yanga, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have Flo real quick give us the story of Yanga because I know he knows about it.
Yes. So Yanga is a town, if I'm correct, right? That was founded in the early, I want to say early 1600s or late 1500s, right?
Yes.
And it was the first independent village of not just Mexico, really the Americas, and it was amazing because I mean this had never happened, right? I know that people talk about Haiti in this first successful slave rebellion, but really it was Yanga, and what he was able to do in this area. And for those who don't know who Yanga is, he was an African slave directly from Africa who I think, if I'm correct, even had some like royalty in him. So I think that's probably what motivated him to do that. And essentially, escaped slaves or even freed people joined his community, and they would raid the Spanish caravans, right, or just all these other individuals. And the way he set it up afterwards, right, it got so bad for the Spanish that they were like, you know what, let's just let him do it. Let's let him do his thing. Just let him govern his area as long as he stops raiding us. They had to obviously come to a compromise, but to me, it's really sad that not a lot of people know this story, especially because again, it's the first independent place in all of the Americas. Predates the
Yeah.
United States, predates all of these great, countries that we talk about and slave rebellions or whatever. But yeah, that's what he was, and that's the name of the place. But it changed names, if I'm correct. Right? I think the first name was called
San Lorenzo de los
Los
Negros, right?
Negros. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard that Yanga was from a place called Gabon in Africa, a
Yes.
country today called Gabon.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but I've never been to the town of Yanga. Alvarado is nearby, right?
It's a few hours away, not too far. But that area of like Yanga is more like in the mountainous area.
Oh, okay.
Alvarado's right on the coast to where the water is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, huh? It is. I'm tripping. I'm thinking of something else. I think I'm thinking of the other city that's inland. What's the other city that's inland? It's not Alvarado. It's um, ¿cómo se llama la ciudad que está por
Maybe Jalapa, like the capital,
not
Jalapa.
Jalapa, the other one. Damn, the name is escaping me. It's near Yanga. Um,
Yeah.
no me acuerdo el nombre. But yeah, you're talking about Alvarado. That's the city that supposedly everyone cusses, right?
Yeah.
La ciudad de los mal hablados.
Yeah, mal hablado. That's what they call us. Yeah, tenemos la mala fama del mal hablar. That's what
Hey,
everyone
I want you to educate everybody on here who don't believe me because you are a jarocha. In Veracruz, they say coño, right?
Oh yeah, coño.
People
All the time.
people do not believe me when I tell them that.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah, I heard that. I thought everybody said it until I left Mexico, and then I started hearing like, I guess it's something that they say in like Cuba. Like people say
yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that, and I'm like, no, we say coño all the time. It's like coño va.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. So when I posted a video on my channel where a guy said "coño" and everyone was like, "That dude ain't Mexican." I was like, "Yes, he is, bro. You just
yeah,
don't know Mexico the way you think you do."
yeah.
But give us a little story of how you came to the realization that you had African ancestry and the whole Afro Mexican identity, basically. Even if you identify as Mexican, just what brought you to the realization that there is an African presence in Veracruz, you being una jarocha de la costa, de la mera
Yeah.
costa de Veracruz.
Yeah. So it was I was like in my teens. And so when I was almost 8 years old, we moved from Veracruz to Canada. And
Oh, okay.
so I would go back and visit, every once in a while, like every year, maybe twice a year, we would go back. But I started kind of noticing something like I didn't really see race in the same way in
Yeah.
Mexico as you do once you actually leave Mexico. So it was kind of me asking my mom, hey, why is, mi tia Maria, why does she look black? Like she was very, very dark. She had an afro. Her hair just grew out. She kept it short. And she was just like, oh, well, but because there's black people in Mexico. Some people are just black, some lighter, but she didn't really give me, I don't think she knew a lot about the history. So she would just give me like little things. She's like, yeah, some people are black, your uncle this and your this and that. And she's like, in my, my great grandma as well. It's like she said pelo pajonudo, like a big afro. It's like your great grandma too. And you see my cousin. So she kept pointing out all these people. And I was just kind of like, okay. And then I started noticing people in my hometown that looked almost identical to certain people in Canada who said that they were black. So that's kind of when I started like, okay, there's more to this than just some people are just a little darker or lighter. And I started reading up on it, and that's when I started to find out. And I'm also noticing that as far as like identity, at that time, not a lot of people really recognize that or identify it as like Afro Jarocho or just Afro Mexican.
Because in Mexico, that doesn't
noticing,
really exist. Like, I'm black, I'm this, I'm that. People from the United States don't understand it. That doesn't exist in Mexico. That
right.
kind of identity.
Yeah, it's new. It's new to
Yeah.
everyone because I noticed my
In
one of
Mexico,
my
eres
cousins,
güero, eres negrito, eres
yeah,
moreno, eres indio. That's in Mexico.
that's how it is. Like
Yeah.
they'll say it, but they don't actually recognize or realize that it is coming from somewhere in a place in history. It's kind of just like thrown out that, yeah, this, that. But I noticed recently, like one of my cousins who in her Instagrams, she put Afro Jarocha, and then she started to realize, she's like, she recognized that as far as like, but I think it also took for her to leave Mexico. She left Mexico for like a couple of years and then went back, and it was kind of like, wow, this is new information to a lot of people because it's information that is kind of left out of like the school system for the most part in Mexico.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
that's what me and Flo were talking about. Because he's a historian, he knows a lot about history, especially like Mexican history. We're talking about. It's interesting how the kind of the African or black consciousness of Mexico disappeared in time. That even a lot of quote unquote Afro Mexicans or people who might have African lineage don't even know themselves that they have this lineage.
Right. And they'll say like, soy negro, I'm negro, they'll say that, but they're not actually referring to African or anything related to race. It's strictly just by color. And that's how most people see it. And I know that in my hometown and all like the area around it, if you press someone enough to tell you where they're from, they'll be like, oh yeah, well, my grandpa, my grandma, my great, they were black, they were Cuban, they're probably from Cuba. So there's this misconception that anyone who is very dark and has African features are actually, because a lot of Cubans did go to Veracruz.
Yeah.
So there's that misconception that it actually goes back even further. But I think a lot of the younger, the younger crowd, they are getting more educated on that.
Just like today, you have a lot of Haitians coming into Mexico. And I guarantee you in the future, there's going to be a lot more mixed people in Mexico because of that migration. And they're gonna automatically assume, oh, he's black. It comes from Haiti. It comes from Haiti. That's gonna be the future. In the future, that's probably gonna be the saying. Oh, es haitiano, por eso es negrito.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to Flo real quick. So give us a little bit, because I know you might know more than me, or even Chewy might know. Jose Maria Morelos and Vicente Guerrero were I always hear that they were at least part black in some way. And Vicente Guerrero, who the state of Guerrero is named after, that still has a large Afro Mexican population, they say he abolished slavery. So do you know the story of these two men who are very prolific in the history of Mexico?
Yes, and if they were we were living in that time, they would be called pardos, which is another term for people who are not just African, but they had all three. Like the Spanish and the native, right? But it's obvious that they had strong African features if you look at their murals or pictures or whatever, right? But yes, Vicente Guerrero was somebody who pushed to abolish slavery. It didn't happen under his term because obviously Mexico's first governments were a complete mess. They were all presidents, were overthrown left and right. It still happened before the United States. Still, I think somewhere in the 1830s, if I'm correct. This is why
Yeah,
Texas
yeah.
revolted against Mexico, right?
Hmm.
But just to add to some of the stuff you all were talking about like identity and why people don't identify with African or even Native or all these other terms in Mexico, because it is more of an American thing. I would say that if you come over here, you're like, oh, I'm Afro Mexican or I'm Native, I'm from this tribe or whatever, right? If you go to Mexico, it's very rare to see people do that, like you
Yeah,
said.
exactly.
And a big reason why that's the case is because during right after the independence movement, the goal was to put everybody under Mexican, right? It didn't matter if you were whatever race you were, and in some ways it was beneficial because it helped out. It helped out with the discrimination, at least legally, right? Because the thing was, well, you can't discriminate against me if you're Native or whatever, right? Or if you're Spanish or whatever. But slowly over the years, those identities began to be erased because people began identifying, like you said, just with Mexican or even more specifically with their state or even their town or their city. And um, one of the things that people don't know about, California, more specifically Los Angeles, the majority of the founders were part black,
Yes, that
right?
is true. Yeah.
And that is
And some of the ones that came to the Bay Area, there was mulattoes and
exactly.
Afros listed on the list of the Diaz expedition. If you know that history.
And the last Mexican governor of California, Pio Pico,
Yeah.
clear features. I mean, if you look at the guy, I mean, and this is
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
150, 160 years ago. So the African root, I would say, definitely was erased right after the the revolution period because during that period there was an attempt.
You're talking about the 1810 revolution, right?
No, I'm talking about the 1910 one.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
Pancho Villa and all that.
yeah, because if you look at some of those pictures of those people, you still see it. Even Zapata had some African, in him, right? I think the town he was from, he had African lineage, but up until then, you know, Africans or blacks, right, were living amongst other people. But up until then, the emphasis was okay. We are a mestizo people, specifically mestizo, right?
Yeah.
Emphasizing the native and Spanish ancestries, and then the African root was just kind of like, okay, well, yeah, it's part of us too, but it's not enough. And over the years, people just stopped talking about it until again it was brought up until recently. But again, there's lots of books that the one that I recommend again called Colonial Blackness. That one I really like it because it gives you personal accounts of people who lived through these events. They talk about how they experienced life in the colonial period. And another reason why the African root was lost is because in Mexico, it wasn't just about race too. It was the main driver was Catholicism, and Catholicism could save you out of slavery because the Spaniards didn't believe that you could enslave another Christian. So a lot of these African women who were considered pretty by society, right, would marry into Spanish families, and then they would essentially lose their African ancestry right through that process. And so even with the native people too as well, if you want to say that.
But even
But
even I heard even like if a black man got with an indigenous woman, their kid wouldn't be considered a slave under the
Right.
Spanish rule.
no, it's true because again, slavery went through the mother, just like in the United States, right? So
Yeah.
the mother's status, could affect. But again, she had to be a Christian or a Catholic. If she wasn't baptized, it didn't matter. So a lot of these people would use that as an advantage. Okay, well, if I become Catholic or if I become Christian, then I'm going to lose my status as a slave, right? So that was
Yeah.
a motivator. And the thing about all of Latin America is that yes, we have different races, and different cultures, but the thing that unites all of us, right, is the language, and again, Catholicism, right? At least up until recently, because obviously now today you have more complex identities, but that's why it's so hard for people to say, yeah, I'm black or I'm native, because the driver was okay. Well, Catholicism or Latinidad, right? Hispanidad, right? That's the thing that would keep people, I guess, together, right? And here in the United States, you didn't never really had that opportunity. It was more about race, and that's why
Yeah.
race is more important. And when a lot of people come here, even if they have these visible African features, they never consider themselves black until they're told, "Hey, you're black." Even
Yeah.
Dominicans will look really black. I mean, they're like, "No, I'm Dominican." I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
right? So,
And that goes more with Trujillo, who was the
yeah,
dictator. He's the one that tried to erase black identity in the
exactly.
DR. But I wanna change it from history to actual evidence of blackness. And Chewy, this one's probably better for her because she's gonna know what I'm talking about when I bring it up. So I'm gonna talk about things that are ingrained in the culture that are obviously have African roots that we just kind of forgot they're African. So like in Veracruz, we have a lot of cultural things that I guarantee you are probably originate from the African identity of Veracruz or the past, you know what I mean, of slavery, and Cuba and the Caribbean, and we got to take all those factors in. Like the accent of Veracruz is very coastal. Some people might say that it kind of sounds like something you would hear in Puerto Rico or in Cuba or in the Dominican Republic, even though it's a little different, but like Coño and similar, that would be one thing that we could say has roots in that mixture. But also names. Are you familiar with names like Mosamboa, Mozambique, Mandinga, Yanga? Um,
Yeah, the names of a lot of the towns
yeah,
are African.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
even like La Bamba, the song.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
so there's so much there, and people don't realize it.
The
It's so Mexican, yet it's not.
Even the song Jarocho itself has African roots.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
what I had heard is that a lot of slaves uh, intermingled their music because they wouldn't let them have their drums, so they would
Yeah, they took away
they
the
would
dreams.
they took over the tarima with their feet and they would mimic the drums with the zapateo that the Spaniards were doing.
Wapango, yeah.
Yeah, and then I heard the way they played the string instruments and the way they sang was very similar to what you hear. Actually, it's very similar as a musician. It's very similar to what you hear like in son cubano, in some of the jibaro music from Puerto Rico. The way they sing and the way their falsettos, it's
And then
very
like the
similar.
call and response, what
Exactly.
they say is very, yeah, it's African. That's how it is with the son jarocho as well. Yeah.
And even within the son jarocho, are you familiar with a style called conga? I heard that that's the most African of the son jarocho styles. And it's dying. There's some people trying to revive it now.
Yeah, well, I have seen how they are trying to kind of reconnect more to like the African roots. I have noticed there's been like this little mixture. I'm not familiar with like the names or exactly what is going on, but I have heard it just, being out and about and hearing of like, hey, there wasn't that many like drums and things like that incorporated into the son jarocho. So there's
The
a lot
con-
of like reconnecting going on.
the conga I'm sure you heard it if you're from Veracruz. The most famous conga song was the one that goes, "Ahí viene el viejito, ta na 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 na, ahí viene el
Oh, El Pobre
viejito,
Viejo.
ta na 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 na." That song, you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, right?
Yeah, El Pobre Viejo. Yep. Every for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, that song, the beat of it is very African.
Yeah,
It's
and it's a lot of
yeah,
drums.
yeah.
Definitely
The beat
familiar
is
with that one.
yeah, it's like a 6/8 beat, but it's very African. You know what I mean? And then also you have Guerrero, which we haven't talked about, and Tabasco too. A
Yeah.
lot of times people forget the state of Tabasco, which is Veracruz's neighbor, has some African influence by the way
Yeah.
they talk, some of the names, the music. Are you familiar with the tamborileros de Tabasco?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've heard that was a mixture of the African drums and the flutes, the Native American
Yeah,
flutes,
like
kind
the
of like
flute.
cumbia. That's how cumbia originated in Colombia with the African drums and the flutes that the indigenous people were playing.
Mm.
Yeah, so you got Tabasco, and then you got the state of Guerrero and Oaxaca on the coast.
Yep.
And I would even dare to say most of the state of Guerrero has a little bit of darkness to it,
Yeah.
saying La Way Africana, but especially the coastal areas, like
Yeah.
La Costa Chica, Cuanijipalapa, Acapulco. You got the
That's where
Costa.
you see it most. Even in Veracruz too. Like the closer you are to the water, to the coast, you see more dark people and the features. They kind of change. Even within my hometown, you have all the different like colonias, and the people that are closer to the main town. It's more of a mixture and some little lighter. You go to right on the coast where most of the fishermen are, and they're way darker, and even the accent just from that close, like 10-20 minutes out, they're
Yeah,
that close, but the accent is different. And also I would say the level of education is different. There's more poverty, all that kind of plays into it. You could still see that.
exactly. And same thing with Guerrero. I was going back to Guerrero. You had the Costa Chica, Oaxaca, which Oaxaca is the most indigenous state. So to hear about an Afro population, Oaxaca is almost like what? But like like a Puerto Escondido. What's the other town called? Puerto Escondido, and there's another one. Oh, Tepa Nacional. That whole area is like there's a place called Coyantes too. Those whole areas are the considered the Afro Mexican areas. And one story that they tell a lot, I don't know how true it is, the Costa Chica people tell a lot when I've seen videos about it, is that their roots came from a boat that crashed taking slaves to South America. And that story could be real to a degree because a lot of people don't know Acapulco was a port, and that was the main hub to the Philippines and to South America.
Yeah.
So it was easy to get to Chile, Peru, to Ecuador, Colombia from the Pacific side. So I would not say it's unreal to think that they probably were taking slaves down to like Chile and to Ecuador and to Peru. You know what I mean? So that story there could be truth to it, and it also can be people that escaped from maybe Acapulco or from other parts of Guerrero and went there because it was so secluded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Definitely. I think there's some truth to it just because it is a story that has been passed down. I don't think everyone came from that, but
yeah.
yeah, maybe in just a specific, little town and area, and then the story kind of spread out. But yeah, I think there's some truth to that too.
And besides Son Jarocho in Guerrero, a lot of their music it has African influence, like the son de artesa. They have a few other rhythms out there too that are very. They have this one called Chilena, which is very similar to like music you would hear in South America almost.
Mm-hmm.
So like so it sounds similar to like the Afro Peruvian music. I don't know if you ever heard Afro Peruvian music.
Mm-hmm.
La música negra del Perú. It has similarities,
Yeah, it does.
and yeah, you find that, and even the modern music that they like in Veracruz and in Guerrero, they like salsa, they like cumbia, they
Yep.
like rhythms that originated from Afro Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, la música tropical. I was like, I didn't really know what the name was, this and that, but I do remember a lot of música tropical and a lot of it's a lot of like what the keyboards and the drums,
yeah.
keyboards and the drums.
They call in Veracruz they call música tropical chunchaca.
Yeah, I guess that's what, I don't know all the different names. I just remember
Yeah,
it was música tropical, and you can hear it. Yeah, it is very different than
yeah.
what the majority of Mexico listens to.
In Veracruz, do you guys make like plantains and tostones and stuff like that?
Yeah, los plátanos. Yeah, I remember asking Ricardo, who was here, on the
Yeah,
live before, a long time ago, maybe like more than 10 years ago, and I said something about plantains, and he was like, "What is that?" And I was like, plátano. And he's like, "What is it?" And I was like, "It's like the big banana." I was like, "You don't know what it is?" And I was like, "I thought all Mexicans knew what that was." And he's like, "No, I don't know
I'm
what
half
it is. I've never
Salvadorian,
had it.
so
I don't eat it."
I'm half Salvadorian, so I know exactly what they are. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but and El Salvador is another country that would be a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. Me being half Salvadorian, that's another country that we are very in the closet about our roots with Africa and with the indigenous as well, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like people it's good that you guys came on and gave a little explanation. You gave the cultural aspect of it. Chewy, Flo gave the historical aspect to it. I gave my knowledge on the history. And if you could see, I'm not a narrow-minded person. I'm a very open-minded person. And I grew up in a predominantly African American city, and I grew up around a lot of black people. And I was telling Flo before you got on the way that I started noticing there had to be some kind of African root in Mexico was within my family and within some people that I knew, because my Mexican side, and I'm half Mexican, half Salvadorian, is from Michoacan. And I was telling Flo that when I was a kid, I remember meeting some of my family, and they didn't have traditional Mexican features. They had their phenotype was more like a Creole, like a Creole from Louisiana, like kind of yellowy skin, tannish skin, kind of wavy hair. And I was like, why do they look kind of black? Like I'm like, am I tripping, or do they look kind of black?
Yeah.
And then I have an uncle who has a different mom than my mom. They have the same dad but different mom. And he used to have a natural fro, and his phenotype is very, very black. And we used to call him El Negrito, but we never understood why he looked like that. And then now obviously it makes sense. His mom's side of the family obviously has some kind of African admixture somewhere down the line. And I'm not one of those people, like, unfortunately, before I even started this live, I already had haters hit me up. Why are you talking about this subject? There's no black people in Mexico. But I realize there is no way in hell that there's black people in the United States and all of Central America, because let's get this right, all of Central America has black people from Belize all the way to Panama. Colombia has black people, Peru, Venezuela, Brazil, Ecuador. But you're gonna tell me somehow magically black people or Africans were skipped from Mexico? That never made sense to me as a historian. But now that I've researched it, and before the haters that are watching that are mad at me doing this is the one I'm gonna leave from them. You guys worship the Spaniards and the colonizers so much. Well, guess what? We're using what the colonizers wrote down to bring this history. So how does that make you feel?
It's a very good point.
In the records of the Catholic Church, which you love so much.
It's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes it a lot more easier to track, because the Spaniards were so obsessed with race, and so obsessed with categorizing people. And even though in hindsight probably it was a horrible thing, because then people were treated differently because of that, but it allowed us to be able to track our history, right? And again, there are people out there that are doing the research, that are have access to these things. And I think it's important for us to, again, because there's the history, there's the DNA test, but the more important one I would say is the genealogy, because that's your family history.
Yeah.
And nobody can take that away from you. It doesn't matter what the narrative says or what people say about your state or your country. If you're able to trace certain things to a certain specific people, then that's who you are. And I would say that you should be proud of that. I mean, because you can't change that. It doesn't matter how it happened, and you're here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, I never took a DNA test yet, but if I did,
I recommend you got to do all three of those things, because they will all either add up or they will contradict each other, and give you an idea. Okay, well, what am I then? Right?
Have you done one, Chewy?
Yeah, I took a DNA test like maybe about 12 years ago or something like that. So it's been constantly changing and updating. And now just recently, well, a few months back, I started doing like some genealogy as well. So it's pretty much on par with everything as far as I've been able to see. I kind of what I expected.
What was your admixture, if you don't mind me asking?
It was pretty much when you talk about jarochos, triracial, it's always been around that like 30%, 30%,
Yeah.
And then like there's about like 10% that's kind of like all over the place, doesn't quite make sense. So 4 of that is like it just says I forget the word they use, but they can't chart it.
I think it's unassigned, right?
Yeah, on the side, and then some other little like spots here and there, like in like the Middle East and East Africa and stuff.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
really tiny percentages, all like East Africa up into the Middle East. So
Well, East Africa makes sense. That would probably be more the Moorish from the
the more,
Moors.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly what I was thinking because we actually have well, we have like the Mojigangas in my hometown. And I remember reading something about the Moors or something like that. And I've been trying to find that information again because when I read it, I was in high school and I
yeah,
didn't really understand. I was like, Moors, huh? What? But I noticed in like they have like desfiles and stuff like that. And people are dressed up and they have like Turkish flags and all this. And there's something that has to do with the Moors,
yeah,
with the
yeah. That
Moors.
makes sense.
But they do that every year during the las fiestas patrias of like our hometown. So it's there, it's still there. People are still celebrating it and doing whatever it is. I don't quite understand it because I wasn't able to find the information I was looking for
Yeah,
now that I can understand it. But the little bit that I remember reading as a teen, yeah, it was talking about the Moorish people that I guess went to the area of Veracruz.
yeah. Your African DNA. Where did it come from? What part of Africa did it say?
It was from West Africa. I think the majority of it was from West Africa and then North Africa
Okay,
and East Africa. So it was
so that
kind
means
of
you're West African and you're more.
yeah. So what I just said, Sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa, North Africa, East Africa. So it was kind
Yeah.
of all over the place. My DNA test is everywhere.
So
One
was
thing
yours.
I did not get that my cousin got was actually a Filipino. So when
Oh,
you brought up
Yeah.
like the whole slave, like the
that
ship
that
with the
makes
slaves
sense
and
too.
everything.
Yeah, that makes sense because a lot of people don't know that the Philippines was part of Mexico when it was New Spain.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
Philippines,
they brought
Magellan,
on the
what's it called? The
Filipinos.
Magellan, Acapulco.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
Acapulco slave galleons or trade.
Yeah, exactly.
But I did want to say this before I take off today
Yeah,
regarding what she was talking about, the specific regions. And that's very important too, because again, if you look at the history, the majority of the first African slaves that arrived in Mexico came from West Africa, like Guinea, Senegambia, right? And the later populations arrived from Angola. So that also gives you a better idea as to when your ancestors came to Mexico. It must have been in the very beginning of the colonial area
yeah,
because, the later populations again came from Angola. And eventually they stopped around the 1600s because, I mean, there was no more need to import slaves if you had all these mixed people who were already in Mexico, which is again why, and this is something else to consider or to remember, is that most people don't know that even though obviously the United States has a bigger African or Black descendant population than Mexico, there were more slaves imported to Mexico than
right.
the United States.
Yeah, yeah. And I really believe, not just believe, but at least from what I've seen, when I've seen a lot of Mexican people take DNA tests, there's such a large amount of people that have that like 2%, 4%. Like,
Yeah.
so it's small, but
There.
it's there. So I
yeah,
think there's like a lot more than we think. Like usually people think like, okay, the people in the coast, you got the Costa Chica, you got Veracruz, stuff like that, where you
Yep.
can see it more. But if you really pay attention, it's all over Mexico. It's just to like a lesser degree in other parts of Mexico.
yeah,
Yep.
for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. And it's. I don't understand why it would be something to be ashamed of. I mean, us as Chicanos, those of us who grew up in like me, I consider myself Chicano because I grew up here. We grew up around so much Black culture and we emulate so much of it. From oldies that we listen to, which is Black music. It came from people like James Brown and Mary Wells and Brenton Wood. Those are all African Americans. To hip hop, to even rock. Rock originated with blacks too, like Chuck Berry and various others. We grew up around Black culture so much and we emulated so much. Um, why are we ashamed to say that there is some of it possibly within us? I mean, I see nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
I think I can answer that question just from
Uh-huh.
personal experience. One, I mean, I think where you grow up obviously plays a role, right? I mean, you grew up in the Bay, so in the Bay, I think it's a little different.
Yeah,
Here in LA, there's a lot of black and brown tension, so
exactly.
that's a big role in as to why Mexicans or Latinos don't necessarily get along with blacks. At least culturally, right? And then also going back to the caste system, right? I mean, it's ingrained in our culture to want to be white or to strive to be white as much as possible. So anything that wasn't that was like, okay, well, yeah, you don't want to be that part, right? So
Yeah.
I remember going out and being a kid,
Quieres mejorar la raza,
yeah,
basically.
right. When I would go out in the sun, and there was always, hey, make sure you put, sunscreen so you don't get darker. Little comments like that, right? I mean, even though it didn't matter what I did, I was gonna get dark anyway, right?
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's little things like that people don't even know they're doing, and when you have those two elements, I would say that's why people don't embrace that root. If they don't embrace the native root, they're definitely not gonna embrace that root. That's
Yeah.
root. But like I said, if you do the research, if you do the DNA test, the genealogy, then there's no denying it, and it's really only going to empower you, especially those who are driven by narratives, those who are hardcore, Hispanos or hardcore like
Indígenas.
Chicanos, right? We know a few of those too, that don't accept that, like Chewy said, we're triracial, and in some cases
Exactly.
even a fourth element, the Asian element as well, which I just did an episode on. It's called the Indios Chinos. That's what the Spanish called Filipinos. They call them Indios Chinos,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, I mean, that's what I would say that plays a role as to why Mexicans, Latinos, in areas where the black root is not as present, is not accepted.
What was Jose Vasconcelos' outlook on the black presence in Mexico? Didn't he also say something about it, about La Raza Cosmica having African admixture in it too?
He did have he acknowledged it, but I think his agenda was, okay, we're a mixture of all these different races, therefore we're superior. As a matter of fact, he kind of aligned with the Nazi ideology, not so much with white supremacy, but
Oh, like
saying,
nationalist ideology.
like ethnocentrism. Okay, well, we're the mixture of all these, so we're superior to everybody else because we have everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
Somebody from Sinaloa in the comments asked, "Are there blacks in Sinaloa?" That's a good one.
There was a bunch of silver mines in there, so you could bet bottom dollar that there was a bunch of African slaves in there.
It's not as prevalent there, though, huh?
You could kind of hear it though, even when the way they talk though, because
Really?
they have a different way of speaking as well, right? They don't pronounce a lot of sounds, kind of like you were talking about, like a
They're Norteños, so they kind of have that northern sound to me.
yeah, like when she was saying elao, right? Like that's how I say it in Veracruz, and like they'll speak a little differently. And I noticed that too when I was younger. I was like, why do these sound different from the rest of you know parts of Mexico? I mean, but they had a lot of silver mines there.
I know they have a carnival there, like in Veracruz and Mazatlan. They just passed right now, and the Veracruz one just passed today. Today's Fact Tuesday, so
Yeah,
yeah,
same thing. Zacatecas too. They had a lot of silver mines in Zacatecas. Any Africans went to everywhere, right? But specifically the mines, because they were so brutal, and the native people could not handle the mines, so they would African slaves to work there.
For sure.
Yep.
Where are you from, Flo? I don't know if you said it. I didn't catch it.
My family's from Michoacan.
Michoacán?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What part of Michoacan?
Small town called Tlaxcalca, close to Morelia, close to Zacapu, close to La Piedad, around that area.
Yeah, my family's from around La Piedad, my Mexican side.
Nice.
Yeah, I was talking to one of the guys who's on here right now. He's Italian. I was telling him how there was an area that was founded by Italians in Michoacan.
Yes.
Nueva Italia and Lombardia.
Yes.
Yes, a lot of Italian farmers went there back in the days.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's that admixture too. Some people have that in their DNA. They get Italian.
Absolutely.
I wanted to say something too when you were saying something about your family, that they kind of look like Creole or something like that.
Oh, mine's? Yeah.
As far as like the Creoles, there were a lot who did go to Veracruz as well. So there's actually people in Veracruz who can trace their roots back to Louisiana.
That
and
makes
it
sense.
happened when
That makes sense because when I was in Veracruz, I definitely seen people that could pass for like Creoles.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's, I think, as far as like the mixture is similar in a sense, at least at some point in history. But I guess when they were like trading, like in the Gulf of Mexico, and they had the ships going back
Yeah,
and forth, a lot of the Creoles who would go to Veracruz, they noticed that the people there could own their own businesses and they didn't have curfews and that kind of thing. So a lot of them ended up moving to Veracruz instead of just staying up in Louisiana because they noticed
okay.
yeah, they could be more, they were free pretty
Yeah,
much, they could
that
live
makes
freely
that makes
down
total
there. So there are
sense.
families that know this, and they started like growing like okra and stuff like that all in the Veracruz area and all that. So
Yeah, that makes total sense. One last thing, and Flo can answer this one. This is before we get off, because the hour mark is coming up, and I want to let you guys go too. And then where Chewy's at, I know it's really late. So,
yeah.
Flo, the Mexican American War, the Texas Revolution, is it true it got started partly because of slavery?
That was one of the main reasons why it wasn't the only one, but I would say that was like the nail in the coffin because there was a lot of things that really influenced that revolution. But once Guerrero and the Mexican government said, "Yeah, you guys can't bring your slaves here," that was like the excuse to say, "Okay, you're taking away our rights." That's what they said, right? To own people, right? That was the logical reasoning for them to go into that. But yes, that was one of the main factors. And just to add on to what you were talking about the Creoles, people forget that Louisiana was actually part of the Spanish Empire too for a while.
Exactly. It was at one
So,
point.
so
Yeah.
there was a lot of movement between those two areas. A lot of the Midwest was under the Spanish Empire as well. So that's probably another reason why they intermingled as well.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen the movie The Alamo, the new one, the more recent one that came out like 15 years ago?
I didn't see it, but I heard of it.
There's a scene. There's my favorite scene where there's two slaves, and one of them's like, "I'm gonna fight for the Alamo," and then the other slave tells him, "Are you crazy? Put that gun down." He's like, "Remember, in Mexico they don't have slavery, so when the Mexicans come over the wall, just tell them yo soy negro, no soy gringo."
Yep, and there was also a lot of Mexican, peasants or Mexican, laborers who would actually go into the plantations and help them escape into what is now, Texas or the western part of Texas. Because again, the disputed area was between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. It
Yeah,
was never really an agreement as to where Texas was actually divided. So you had a lot of men specifically who would go into the plantations and take the women, the black women from the plantations and help them escape and marry them and also have intermix. So you have Mexican element, well, not just African but American, right? Like I
yeah,
said, total population.
yeah. So there has been like relations between blacks and Mexicanos going back to colonial times, going back after that with the Mexican American War, and even some of the founders of California and Texas having, or in New Mexico, having black ancestry in them as well. So we have more in common with the African, or at least the black community in general, as than we think. We just have been taught, here, like the homie Ricardo always says, Mexicans, we're culturally racist.
Yep.
Yeah, we're culturally racist, and we're still kind of going by what the caste system that the Spaniards put on us many years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like the Mexican government, even with the nationalist movement in the after the revolution, some of that also played a part in it. So I mean, to me, it's just good that this is starting to be brought up to light. It has nothing to do with Afrocentrism or anything. With me, it's all about history and facts. And this is something that has been written, and the proof is out there if you go looking for it. And even in Mexico, the country that we claim we love so much, you'll find evidence of it as well within our food, within our culture, within our music, within some of our words, some of our names as well. You know what I mean? And I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm about to get off, so I'll let you guys get one last word before you guys get off. I know you guys are busy.
Thank you again. Thank you, Jose. You know, I know this is short notice, but
Yeah,
you personally asked me to come on. I mean, I will definitely do my best to come on, especially about stuff that I'm passionate about, that I like to talk about. But if you would like to know more about just some of the stuff that I know, not just, you know, Afro Mexican history, like I said, I'm a historian. You can
exactly.
follow me on my channel. It's Flow, obviously, on YouTube. But if you want to be more specific, it's F.L_O.W_. And I talk about, you know, things that push the narrative, things that go against the narrative in our history. To inform you, I give you sources so you can read them. It's not just me talking about things. I want people to learn things and to educate themselves and ultimately just empower themselves. So, again, thank you for having me on. And hopefully, y'all can check out these episodes. I do have a new one coming out that's ironically going to be talking about identity and genealogy and history, and more specifically, my personal, you know, genealogy and my history and my DNA. So, be prepared to be shocked, Jose, or
All
anybody
right,
who's
man.
watching.
All right, thanks for coming on for such short notice, bro.
For sure.
All right, man. And Chewy, one last before you get off. Thank you for coming on short notice, and you're in the East Coast, so thank you a lot.
Yeah, it's
I know it's a little bit
108 over
hard for you.
here. Yeah, my daughter's nice and quiet over there. She's been excellent, still awake. But thank you for having me. I don't have a YouTube channel or anything right now, so I got what I started on TikTok, but that's about it. But I do just think I do like to really share a lot of this information. I could just keep going on and on and on about uh, these kind of, I guess, to have these kind of discussions because it is something that a lot of people are not aware of and don't know.
Yeah,
And it was very interesting when I went down this little path and realized, wow, most people don't realize these things. So
like
yeah,
I was
thank you for
telling
having
you, most people don't even realize that there's parts of Mexico where they don't talk like traditional Mexicans.
me. Yeah.
You know, they
Mhm.
like coño and stuff like that. Like that
Yeah.
shocks people. Like what? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's good to bring these things out to light.
Yeah. It definitely is. Definitely is.
Even me, when the first time I ever heard the norteño accent from el norte de Mexico, I tripped out.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever heard the Chihuahua accent?
Well, I don't know how to tell them apart. I just say norteño all across.
Okay. No,
I just know they sound different up north.
the first time I heard a Chihuahua accent, I was like, "What the hell? What, is he from Chile or something?" He's like, "Say Chihuahua, chingao, la muchacha." So I was like, "What the
Yeah, I don't really know people from there personally. I just know the north speaks a certain way. I've been to like Mexico City and have family there as well. So there,
Everyone knows
that
the
Chilango
Chilango accent.
accent, and then the Yucateco accent because my dad lives in Cancun, and I've been around the area. There's a lot of people that go there. So you have like that Maya kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
accent that creeps in.
That's
So
like the Yucateco accent.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
like it's kind of all yeah. But yeah, we definitely speak very different
in
in the
every
song,
region.
and they're always telling us that we sound like we're Cuban, even though I don't think so. They're like, oh, you guys
Yeah,
sound like the Cubans. I'm like, I don't think so, but it's different enough that you guys can compare it to that. Like
I
other
had
people compare it
I
to that.
had a jarocha tell me she wanted to come because I'm a musician too. I told you this that I play cumbia and I play music from
Mhm.
Colombia. That's my specialty, Colombian music. And like, how did this Mexican Salvadorian get into Colombian music? Everyone always
Yeah.
asks me that. But I actually invited una jarocha to one of my dances, and she said something that was interesting. It sounded like a very Colombian word. She's all, "No, Jose, es que yo soy bien bullanguera."
We use that too.
Yeah, and I tripped out because I was like, wow, that sounds like a Colombian word. Porque in Colombia,
Yeah.
there's a rhythm that's similar to cumbia called bullerengue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, so
bullanguera. So
bullanguera. So she told me that. I was like, wow, that's a trip. That sounds like a Colombian word almost. Yeah,
yeah.
so that's what I'm saying. There's such a diversity in Mexico within our races, our cultures, and even the way we talk and our foods. It's interesting how we don't explore Mexico more than as much as we claim to love to be Mexican. But yeah, we don't know nothing about Mexico outside of the rancho or the pueblo where our family's from.
Yeah, mariachi,
Yeah,
tacos, and
that's it. And banda.
yeah. See, I wasn't even familiar with banda until I got wait, I was like in my 20s, I think, when I was like, huh, that's what you call banda? Oh, okay. Is it like, I'm still confused about what it is. I was like, is it like Bronco? I remember when Bronco was like really
No,
big.
banda is big band music from Sinaloa specifically. That's what banda is.
Yeah, well, see, I don't know the difference between one another. I was like, I just
Yeah.
remember, oh, banda music, like, is it a band like Bronco or something?
I
But
think
not like,
I think Bronco was more like group, what they call grupera music, música de grupo.
oh, grupera. Yeah, see, I was just thinking like banda group, and I was like, is that what it is? And actually, I'm still not familiar with that. It's
Yeah,
like just like Veracruz and what's going on there is foreign to other parts of Mexico.
exactly.
It's
When I
like for
went to
me, other things in Mexico are foreign to me because I didn't grow up with that at all.
when I went to Veracruz, I was in shock of how culturally different it was from the rest of Mexico. Like I
Yeah.
was like in a culture shock. It was beautiful though, but it was
Mhm.
a cultural shock. The way they talked, how hard it was for me to understand what they were saying half the time. Just culturally, the foods were different. They were good though. Don't get me wrong, they were good.
You have
I
some
remember,
good food.
I remember empanadas were everywhere. It kind of reminded me of Colombia. There was a lot of empanadas everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, uh, uh, and it definitely did have like this kind of, like, I don't want to say Cuban, but it definitely
It's
had
like
a
a Caribbean feel
the
though.
Caribbean feel.
Like
Like
that's what I've heard too when my ex went there and he kept saying, I feel like I'm in a Caribbean. I feel
yeah,
like even the way people look, it's not because he had been to Trinidad and he kept
yeah,
saying like, I feel like I'm over there. The way that people look is
yeah.
so different than what I expected. And he
Yo,
actually went to people to ask, well, not went, he wanted me to ask, and I was like, I don't want to ask them where they're from. They're just gonna say they're from here because literally Alvarado's like so small. That's
yeah,
all they're gonna say. And like, no, ask her where she's from. It was a girl here. She would look like someone that's like mulatto,
yeah.
curly hair, her features and everything. And I was like, why? She's gonna say she's from here. So I asked, and he was kind of like pressing it because she was like, why do you want to know? And then she was like, de aquí, de Alvarado. He's like, yeah, but where from before? And I was like, everybody here is Mexican. We don't get tourists here or anything like that. And he kept asking and asking, and they're like, God, I'm from here. Like, where else do you want me to tell you? I'm like, everybody is going to keep telling you that because they're just from here. So many generations back from here,
Yeah, it definitely did have that Caribbean vibe to it for sure. I felt it big time there.
Yeah.
You know, especially in the morning. I remember I would see the fishermen going out to sea in the little boats,
Lanchas, las lanchas,
the
yeah.
lanchas. Yeah, it was dope. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I haven't been back. This was like 10 years ago. I definitely want to go back to Veracruz. I'm going to Colombia this year, but after that, El Salvador and Veracruz are definitely places I want to go back to.
I
For sure.
hopefully will be in Veracruz in a couple months. Trying to plan something out with my brother, so hopefully we'll be able to make it. And I already have a little trip planned in the lanchas with my uncles because they're fishermen. So he was like, next time you come
Yeah.
down, make sure I can take you out in a lancha. I was like, yes, I haven't been on one in so long.
Even the music, like I heard mostly just like salsa and cumbia and like reggaeton and merengue. I didn't really hear like corridos or banda. I didn't really
We
hear that
don't listen to that. If it's like a huge song that blows up,
kind of.
then we'll listen to that song. But aside from that, like I wasn't familiar with any of the other music anywhere else.
I'm gonna show you something. Hold on, real quick. You're gonna laugh. Hold on. I'm gonna show you a souvenir I brought from Veracruz.
Mm.
I got me a sombrero jarocho when I was out there. You see it?
Oh yeah, my
I
grandpa would wear those all the time. Yeah.
I bought me one. I bought two of them when I was out there.
Mm.
I wear them sometimes when I do shows.
Oh yeah. Did you
Yeah,
get like your pañuelo too? Like
yeah. I have the
like
Colombian
pañuelo, guayabera. Like my grandpa always dressed like that. The hat, el pañuelo, la guayabera, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the jarocho basically.
Yeah. Old school.
I got the Colombian hat too when I do cumbia shows. I wear those too.
Oh yeah, I got the Colombia hat too when I went to Colombia.
Yeah, yeah. I've been to Colombia. I'm going back. I'm gonna go to the Caribbean coast of Colombia this year.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
so definitely Definitely want to go there. I'm
Go
going
to
to.
Cartagena. Have you been to Cartagena?
No, I haven't been to the coast yet. When I went to the interior of the country because all my
Um,
friends were there. I went to Medellin and to Antioquia.
okay, yeah. I've been to Medellin, but if you go to Cartagena, pay attention. Did you say you went to like El Puerto de Veracruz?
I went to El Puerto. I went to Mandinga. I went to. I wanted to go to Alvarado. I passed through briefly through um Jalapa, which is a very nice town.
Mm.
I wanted to go to Yanga, but it was really far out. It was
Yes,
Cordoba. That's the name of the place.
Córdoba. Okay.
Yeah, it
Mm.
was going out that way. Um, but I definitely went to the Puerto de Veracruz. It was dope. I had fun there. I had a lot of
I
fun
found
there. The only thing you guys can keep is that freaking heat. Oh my god.
I thought you were gonna say los zancudos or los chaquistes.
That too, but
Like,
that heat.
but
Oh,
I bring it up because when I went to Cartagena, it reminded me a lot of El Puerto de Veracruz.
Veracruz.
If you go to like a certain area where like you know how they have the walled city in Cartagena,
Yeah, yeah.
like
Oh,
they
San Juan
used
de
to.
Ulua.
Yeah, so yeah, when they used to have all that in Veracruz, if you see like the architecture down that area, it
Yeah.
reminded me so much. I was like, wow, this reminds me of Veracruz, El
I'm
Puerto.
actually, my plan is to go to a town called Cincelejo. I don't know if you ever heard of that in Colombia.
No, I don't know
That's
that.
that's called las área sabanera. That's where all the cumbia groups came from, like all the famous
Like
cumbiamberos.
el
Huh?
burrito sabanero.
Yeah, that's where that comes from exactly.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want
I
to
saw
go
the story
there.
of the guy who
I want to
sang
go to
it.
I want to go to Cartagena, Santa Marta, and then I want to go to a place called Valledupar. That's where Vallenato came from.
Oh, see, we went to Cartagena, Santa Marta, and then we were when we were on our way to Tayrona. We went to Tayrona
I heard
Park.
of Tairona.
Yeah,
That's a Native American tribe, Los Taironas.
yeah. We went hiking and spent the night there and everything, and we did come across like the native people of the area there. They were selling the coconuts. A lot
Now,
of kids they were climbing up selling the coconuts to
now
us.
you want to talk about Afro? I always tell people on here, Colombia is very black,
Yeah, yeah.
very
We went
black.
to Cali, Colombia,
Yeah, Colombia.
during
I,
the
I,
festival, the
Cali,
Afro Festival.
yeah, Cali for sure. That's where the salsa's popular.
Yep.
But Cali's right by Buenaventura, which is almost all black,
Mm-hmm.
which is on the Pacific coast. Yeah, so there's a lot of, the whole Caribbean coast and Pacific coast is almost all black. People don't realize that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
mixed
The
black.
coast and
Yeah, so definitely you see that out there big time in Colombia. That tripped me out when I was out there. I was like, wow, it's like there's a lot of black people in Colombia.
yeah.
It's like being back
There's
home
a
almost.
lot. Like I said, I can't remember the name of the festival, but it's like an Afro festival. It's huge now, and they televise it and everything. And there was a lot of Afro Colombians there. So many. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people think it's only Pablo Escobar looking people. We're like, nah,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of black people in Colombia.
Yeah.
A lot. One thing, have you ever been to the Carnival in Veracruz? You know what? I missed it by 2 days when I was in Veracruz.
Oh, that sucks. I haven't been to the one in El Puerto. No. The only one I've been to is the one in my hometown.
Oh,
But
and
I
Alvarado.
haven't been to the one in El Puerto. I've always wanted to go, but it hasn't aligned for me. So
Okay.
maybe soon.
I got a funny story before I get off about Veracruz. Veracruz is the first place ever in my life that I've been called güero. I swear to God, it was hilarious. I was at the wall. I was at San Juan de Ulua, and I was walking out, going towards where the taxis are to catch a taxi back into town. And this lady was selling souvenirs, and she's like, "Güero, güero, ven, güero." And I looked around. I said, "Oh, no, you güero." And I was like, there must be a white guy around here. And I looked at her, and she was pointing at me. Güero, man. Güero? I'm not güero.
I laughed too because my uncle, El Güero, he's like probably like one of the blackest looking Mexicans there are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he very, very dark skinned with his fro. his features, everything. And that's it. Mi tío el güero, which I didn't know his name up until maybe like a month ago when I saw him pop up on Facebook, and I don't even remember what his name was, but el güero. That was his name. He was dark as can be.
She was like, "Bueno, when I am a little light skinned, but I'm not that light skinned." And she was like, "Bueno, ven." I was like, "Oh shit, there must be a white guy around here."
Yeah.
That was hella funny. But yeah, man, Veracruz, I loved everything except the damn heat. That humidity will kill you.
It's a different kind of heat. Like my dad moved to Cancun, and so my youngest sister, she pretty much has been there since she was like a very, very young kid. She was like 4 or 5 years old. And even them, when they go back to Alvarado to visit, they're like, they can't take the heat. It's nothing compared to like the heat that you feel in Cancun, because it's just, les say, es bochorno. Es bochorno lo que se siente, you know, and it's like the humidity is just like.
What does bochorno mean?
Like when it's like really, really, really hot, like you just feel it everywhere.
That must be a jarocho word, huh?
Maybe I'm just realizing it right now. Like maybe is it because I just know if I hear bochorno, it's like the type of heat that just like hits you. It's like everywhere, and there's a lot of humidity there in the area too. So that makes it that much worse. Yeah.
I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, so up here, I mean, it's cold all the time here where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like a cold weather here all the time. So any little heat, we're crying like we're crying, little girls.
Well, yeah, no, not over there.
Yeah, over here it just gets even 70 degrees, and we're like, oh my god, it's hot.
Yep. I won't visit Veracruz in the summer. I can't, between not just so much the heat, but it's like the mosquitoes and all that. Like I get covered in bites.
Yeah, well, all right, I gotta get off because there's other people sleeping now, and I don't want to be loud. But thanks for coming on, and thanks for giving the perspective of being from Veracruz, from that culture of Veracruz, the Afro Mexican history. A lot of people here don't realize that there's a part of Mexico that's completely different. Hey, I always tell people, go explore those areas, go see them. They're beautiful areas. You'll really.
People are very welcoming, very warm and welcoming. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to see a Mexico diferente, go to Veracruz and go to that region of Tabasco, Veracruz, and all that. That's it's a unique part of Mexico for sure.
Yeah.
All right, all right, Chewy. Well, thanks for coming on. Any last words before you get off?
Oh, just thank you again for having me.
Okay, all right. Well, gracias. Hopefully, we could have you again next time. We could talk about maybe a similar topic, or we could talk about. You said you had lived in Detroit. We could talk about what it was like growing up in Detroit. That really fascinates me. Like when I hear stories about raza that grew up in the Midwest, because I have a lot of friends from the Midwest.
Well, I grew up in Canada up until then I moved to Detroit. So
that would be interesting how how Canada and Detroit were totally different.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with Mexican Town in Southwest Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy named Sneaky Beanie. He comes on here sometimes. He's from there.
Yeah.
He's from Southwest Detroit.
Mm.
And then people say that Latinos from Oakland are very similar to like Latinos from Detroit because we grew up around a lot of black people.
Yeah.
All right, then. Well, I'll talk to you later. Gracias for coming on and keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, then. Take care.
Thanks.
All right, y'all. That was it for today's topic on Afro Mexicans and about the history of blacks in Mexico and African history of Mexico. This is not something about being, how can I say, Afrocentric or trying to push an agenda. No, we're speaking facts here. We're not speaking nonsense. We're not speaking things that were made up or pseudosciences. No, we're speaking facts about the colonization of Mexico. And it's a part of colonization that's not talked about as much. You know what I mean? So definitely it was nice to have. I was surprised that the guests came on. I didn't know if they were going to come on because I kind of last minute invited them. But thank you to Flo and to Chewy for coming on. She's actually from Veracruz, so she grew up in that culture, which is dope to have that side. And Flo, even though he's Michoacano like me, I'm half Michoacano. he knows a lot about Mexican history, and I know a lot about Mexican history, so we could give the historical aspect, but we also heard the cultural aspect. You know what I mean? So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's live with Jay, number 81. If you guys want to donate a super chat, go ahead and donate a super chat. If you want to donate anything to the to the Cash App, you can do that as well. Help out and support the channel, man. You know, everybody supports all these other folks. Help me on. You feel me? Oh, White Boy 51000. Oh, I remember you, bro. What's up? How you been? So if anybody wants to donate a super chat or a Cash App, don't be afraid to donate a little something to Oakland Latinos United, for I could keep bringing you this good content. You know what I mean? Helping out my channel. Share these videos, let people know about it. You're not gonna get these topics in too many channels. And I've been good, bro. I've been good. It's been a minute, brother. But I'm still doing my thing. I'm still out here in the 510. But yeah, I'm about to get off because I have to get off now. Everybody's asleep. I don't want to wake up people, and I can't be loud. But you guys be safe. Thank you guys for chiming in. Before I get off, let me know in the comments what you think about today's topic. If you want to donate a super chat, once again, help a brother out. But if you guys like the topic, let me know what you guys think of it. And later, Jay. Strength, though. Stream. Great stream. Gracias. Gracias, RB Nessie. Gracias, Supela. And, you know, everybody that was on here, you know, hopefully you guys enjoyed that topic. What's up to Chris Grima, the Shortcuts, RB Nessie, Cepeda, Sam Boy, Joanna, who was on here earlier, and everybody else who came on. You know what I mean? Thank you guys for tapping in tonight, and hopefully we can keep doing these. It gives me a different about our origins, but also our modern times. Oh yeah, for sure. You know, that's you never know. You take a DNA test and you might have some African blood in there. You know what I mean? I probably have it. Who knows? I mean, look at my nose. I have a wide nose, so who knows? You know what I mean? Thank you, Esepera. But yeah, yo, I'm about to get off, and you guys be safe. Actually, I'm gonna go hit the gym. I've been hitting the gym again, so I gotta get that cardio in. I'm gonna do cardio today too. I might go tomorrow and do weights. There's a lot of Haitians in Mexico now for sure. Is there a thing as Afro Indigenous? Of course there is. A lot of us are Afro Indigenous and we don't realize it. And Sinaloa, Nairobi. Isn't that what they wanted to call East Palo Alto at one point, Nairobi? Jay's in beast mode. but he means practically in today's terms. All right, y'all. Well, I'm about to get off. Well, I'm gonna give it like 2 more minutes and I'll get off. But like I said, go do the blade for cardio. Now I'm gonna go to the gym for a little bit, bro. I gotta get at least. Doctor said I gotta get at least a half an hour of workout. But when I go to the gym, I'm there for like an hour and a half. But yeah, man. Like I said, there was no biases today. We were just looking at a historical aspect of Mexico's history. Raza del Sol, what's up, brother? You know what I mean? And giving you guys something that is not often talked about in our history. You know what I mean? It's been kind of ignored and forgotten about. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with learning it. It gives us a better perspective of our culture, of our history. You know what I mean? And it is what it is. Some people don't like it. Some people get offended. But hey, I'm not here to please everybody. I'm here to bring hardcore facts. And what I brought today were facts. I didn't bring, pseudosciences like other people. You know what I mean? RB Nessie, we should talk about we should have you on next time. Maybe next live with Jay, we could talk about the Italian history and culture in Mexico and in Latin America. Would you be down for that in the future for another live with Jay? And also partly because it's Black History Month, I decided to do this topic on Black history in Mexico, but it's not there. They took it off. There's a few of them, bro. If you look up Afro Mexican history, you'll find there's a lot of stuff on YouTube now. We should deeper dive it. Yes, yeah, I'm down to do it, bro. Because there's also that influence in Mexico and in Latin America as well. People don't know about it. Focus on all the details on that topic when we do. Yeah, for sure. Like I told you, Arvinesi, there's still a town where they speak Italian in Mexico called Chipilio in Puebla. I'm not sure if that's the only town that still has Italians in it, like a big Italian presence, but it's definitely like the Little Italy of Mexico. It's Chipilio. I think I sent you a video about that before. I'm sure you've seen it. Do with slave trade and small part of migration. First time we was chopping all over and y'all had the cabacho roast. Yeah. In Jersey against Tony Soprano. I watched like 3 documentary places you told me about. Yeah, Chipilio, Puebla. But also in Michoacan, where my mom is from, there's a Nuevo Italia and there's a Lombardia, and then I heard the state of Sonora has a lot of Italian admixture too. Colosio, who was murdered, who ran for president in 1994 and was murdered, he was Italian. He was not Italian, he was Mexican, but he was Italian descendant. Even his last name Colosio is obviously not Spanish. I don't think that Afro Mexicans appear to have, for the most part, similar, integrate, and become part of what now is exactly. That's our soul. They're within us, basically, bro. We just need to stop being so damn racist and so damn offended by the topic and just embrace it as it is what it is. But yeah, man. But anyway, y'all, I'm about to get off. You guys be safe, and we'll talk about yeah, RB Nessie. We'll talk about that soon. Definitely would like to have you on for that. Please don't be offended at anything. It's just let it grow and explore. Exactly. All right, y'all. I'm gonna get off. I'll talk to you guys later. You guys be safe. Thanks for coming in. Raza del Sol, thanks for tapping in too. Homie out there in San Jose. You guys be safe. I did this one not just because it's a good and important topic to talk about, but also it's Black history. So hey, Black and brown relationships, why not? All right, y'all. You guys be safe. Late.